On episode 152 of the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, we speak to bad boss expert Michelle Gibbings, and she's going to tell you how you can identify what type of boss you have, how to deal with them, and how you can deal with a horrible, bad boss. That's right, folks. This show was definitely meant for this podcast. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Yes, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to the podcast where we focus on the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself so that you can be the best leader possible, leading your team so you can build that high-performing team, and finally, leading your organization so you can drive that organizational output through the roof. And here at Moving Forward Leadership, we couple world-class guests like Michelle today with my 20 years of military experience to bring you the most complete leadership podcast going. And if you want more, head to movingforwardleadership.com and we got you covered. It is so great to have you here today, ladies and gentlemen. It is like a show that probably was written for this podcast. I mean, how to deal with bad bosses. The whole mantra of Moving Forward Leadership is lead, don't boss. And that's what we're talking about this whole episode. So is this episode for you? Yes. Yes, it is. Doesn't matter what type of business, what type of organization, what type of leadership lessons you're looking for. This episode is for you. And if you're like, well, I don't have a bad boss, well, congratulations. You're going to learn how not to be from the examples that Michelle brings out in this episode today. You're going to learn how to identify the different types of bosses, how to deal with them, a practical 7-step guide in dealing with a bad boss, and finally, what to do if you're the bad boss. Because guess what? Maybe you are, and you may not even realize it. So Michelle goes through a process how you can check yourself to see if you actually are a good boss, or maybe you're a bad boss and you don't realize it yet. But I would suggest that you're on the path to recovery if you're listening to this show. So this is a great one. Now, who is Michelle? Well, she is on a mission to bring back a little joy back into the workplace because, well, she's an expert in it. She speaks internationally when she can speak internationally on better ways to lead. And she's in high demand as an innovative keynote speaker, advisor, executive mentor with her best-selling books. Michelle's key to success is working with people through three lenses: an individual, a leader, and then the wider role as an influencer with an organization, which fits quite nicely into Moving Forward Leadership, don't you think? So tapping into these facets, she brings self-awareness to the forefront, empowering people to work with those around them in a way that is productive, healthy, happy. It's not really rocket science, but when you are at your best, it inspires others to do the same. And harnessed together, this translates to profitable and beneficial outcomes for all. And we all know those are things we would like. So ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a treat today. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Michelle Gibbings on how you can deal bad bosses. Michelle, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here today.
Scott, thank you so much for having me.
You're like one of a number of Aussies that I've had on the show recently. I don't know what's going on. I think my numbers in Australia are going through the roof. Actually, I know the numbers in Australia are going through the roof. And all of a sudden, now I get all these people from Australia wanting to be on the show. So is there a correlation there? I'm not sure, but I'm going to take it and run.
Oh, look, take it and run with it.
So when I got the pitch for you to come on the show, the title of the book is Bad Bosses. And I was like, I almost didn't even bother to look into the book or anything. Immediately I was like, yes, because my whole mantra here is lead, don't boss. It's all for leaders out there who don't necessarily have a great mentor, who have been promoted. They don't know where to go, but they just know that they don't want to be that stereotypical boss. And how fitting is it? Like, I swear to God, you wrote that book for me in this podcast.
Well, I think my brother-in-law will claim credit for the title. He actually wanted to he was like, your next book, it's got to be about bad bosses. He goes, title, Bastard Bosses. But my publisher's like, no, that's a little bit too harsh. We won't be doing that one.
Yeah, that's a bit, yeah. I like that one too. But we'll keep it PG. We'll keep it with Bad Bosses. So there's got to be a story behind the book. Every book's got a story. Everyone's got a story. I want to know the story behind what led you to write Bad Bosses.
Look, for me, there's a couple of levels to it, and I say this right at the start. I confess I was a bad boss. I go back through my corporate career, and I had 20 plus years in corporate before I started doing what I'm doing now, and I was a bad boss. And not because I was mean or nasty or toxic. I didn't bully. I didn't discriminate, but I could drive things really hard. I had relentless energy and I could move through work really, really quickly. And I didn't realize the impact that I was having on my team. I was really lucky though. I had a very good boss that I worked for, and she pulled me aside and she said, Michelle, I get you're ambitious. I get you want to do a good job. But no one's going to remember the work that you do. When you move on to something else, they'll forget that. The only thing they're going to remember, and this is a whole Maya Angelou quote, is how you made them feel. And she said, your role as the leader is to help your team members get to places that they can't get to, but for the fact that they're working for you. You got to focus on developing them. And it totally flipped my focus from really focusing on task to focusing on people. And what I found then throughout my career as I developed as a leader, and then also in the work that I'm doing now, is whenever people are having trouble, it's not the work, it's the people. I can't connect with my boss, or I'm not getting what I need from my team. And I see it time and time again. We're not stepping in, having the right types of conversations, building the right types of relationships we need to be able to have workplaces that are healthy and constructive. And so that's really the essence of the book. One, sharing experiences and sharing learnings from both my corporate career and the work that I do now.
I love the humility to fully admit, like, hey, I was a bad boss back in the day. And the reality is that sometimes that's the best teacher, right? And that,
and I was going to say, I also think that the thing is as well, is it's a recognition that leadership is learned. It comes from on high, like, ta-da, you are appointed an amazing leader. You learn to be a great leader.
No, I totally agree with you. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I started a podcast, because by day, I'm actually a senior Canadian Army officer. I've led up to 200 soldiers in an organization. I'm on track to be picked for another organization around the 600 to 800 mark. And as great as the leadership development program is, I'm like, I need more. I need more. And it's one of the reasons why I started the podcast. So I get to talk to great people like yourself and, suck the knowledge out of you so that I can go ahead and apply it. And the funny side story was I was actually, when I was commanding that squadron of 200, I didn't tell people about the podcast, and I was like really into it at that point. And I would do things. I would have an interview. I would learn something new. I would go to work the next day and start applying it immediately. And the guys, eventually my captains looked at me one day like, but where are you getting this stuff from? And I'm like, just read and do a few things, talk to a couple interesting people, and you'll learn some things. Lo and behold, I didn't realize I was podcasting on leadership and, culture development and all this stuff. So anyway, in your book, you talk about 4 different types of bosses. Yes. So what are they, or who they are? And the interesting part of, how to deal with them.
So I look at it through 2 lenses. To what extent is the leader aware of the impact that they're having? So are they self-aware? They've got high levels of self-awareness, or do they have 0 level of self-awareness of their impact? And to what extent do they care, and where's their focus? So is it all about them? Are they selfish, or is it all about their team? They're selfless, because that then determines what type of leader that you're dealing with. And the first type is what I call the mercenary. And they are your typical, don't know that I'm a bad leader, don't care. It's all about me. Just help me get the things that I need to get done. I'm just not interested in developing team members, building connections with people. So it's a very transactional relationship. And you can work with people like that, but there's no loyalty. And it can, those sort of relationships often have an expiration date. Then there's what I call the believer. And these people have low levels of self-awareness of the impact that they have. But the difference between them and the mercenary is they're not bad people. They're not seeking to make anyone's life hard. They are just they're in roles they may not have been developed, and they can genuinely care for their team, but they want everybody to like them. And so what then happens is they won't step into conflict. They won't deal with difficult issues. They won't have those challenging conversations. And people like that as leaders can be really hard to work with, because you think you've had a conversation and you've got agreement, but actually they've said yes to the person right beside you. And by them saying yes to you, it actually means they've said yes to the other person, they've said no to you. And you end up in this really difficult situation because you end up having to figure out what's gone on. So what I find with someone like the believer, you can sit down and have a conversation with them about how you work together, because they want to have, that happy, healthy environment. They're just not aware of the impact that they're having. Then you've got what I call the illusionist. And the illusionist is your classic narcissist. They are very good at managing up. They will charm the pants off you, but they will also throw you under the bus if it's going to help them get to where they need to get to. So, similar to the mercenary, you can work with someone like that, but there's no loyalty. There is a very clear expiration date, and you need to know what their agenda is, and you need to know how the service, the work that you do, the value that you offer contributes to what they need, because you are only as useful to them because of that value that you're delivering. And once that value is no longer necessary or of interest to them, you are gone. You are dispensed with. And there's a very well-known person in politics at the moment who absolutely fits that kind of environment, because they often are aware of the impact that they're having. They just don't care. Then you've
no idea who you're talking about. No idea.
No, I know. It'd be very hard, wouldn't it? Very hard to work out. That person actually gets a special mention in a chapter in the book. And then the last is what I call the liberator, and they're your classic good boss. They have awareness of their impact, and also they genuinely want to be a good leader. But I always say to people, no one's going to be perfect. No one is good every single day. People have good days and bad days. And so this is not expecting your boss to be perfect. And also as the leader, it's not expecting yourself to be perfect, but it's recognizing I'm going to turn up every day and I'm going to try to do my best. And I'm going to reflect on what I've done. And if something's not working, I'm going to learn from that. And I'm going to learn about how I can be a better leader every single day. And I think when you are really in that category that you want to be the best leader that you can be, you're open to the fact that you don't have the license on being right. And you know that leadership is learned and it's continual. You don't just go, here's the 10 things, I've done these 10 things, I'm now perfect. It just doesn't work like that.
Love it. And as you explained those 4 different types, I could actually see people, previous bosses in my experience. And I'm like, yep, that person fits there. Oh, this person definitely fits here. Now, I know we could easily have a podcast episode on each one of those types and diving deep into them, but I definitely want to go into 1 and 3, the really difficult ones to deal with, because the listener out there, most likely the reason why they're listening to this podcast is because that's the organization's culture that they're growing up in. They're growing up in this organization, developing, I should say, in an organization where their bosses don't care about them. It's like, hey, I'm going to promote you, sink or swim. Hey, welcome up to the team. Here's your desk. Here's your job. Get to it. Oh, by the way, I'm going to destroy everything in my way to get whatever I want, much like you said. So what are some of the best advice to deal with these 2 types so that leaders out there can take care of their people, take care of the teams that they're leading, so that, these bosses don't destroy the team as well?
And also destroy your soul. Because when you
100%.
work for someone like that, and I've been in that environment, I've been there.
I got
I've
examples. Like, cool.
Yeah, I always say to people, I've been the bad boss and I learned from that. But I've also worked for some bad bosses, and I've also worked for some great bosses. And I remember one boss that I worked for in particular who was particularly hard and in a very, very senior position. And the toll it was taking on my mental health and well-being was excruciating. And it was really my husband who saw it more than anyone. And so he was the one to go, Michelle, what's going on here? I've never seen you doubt yourself so much. I've never seen you second guess yourself. And you are just working extreme hours because, my view was, but I've always been able to fix things. I just need to keep working harder. If I work harder, I can fix this. And then I realized actually I can't fix it. This person isn't going to change. And I think that's one of the critical things as you go through this. I'll talk you through some strategies in a minute, but there is also a point where you go, I've tried all the strategies, I've worked it through, and actually they're not going to change. And so you then have to make a choice. I accept this for what it is, or I vote myself off the island. Now, that can be hard to do. There's the practical realities of life and paying bills and all of that kind of stuff. But also, this is destroying you and your mental health and well-being. The challenge you find is if you stay in that type of environment for too long, you doubt who you are and what you stand for and your ability. And therefore, your success at getting your next role becomes harder, because you don't sell yourself the way you used to sell yourself. You start to absorb the belief structure of the person that you work for. So the couple of things that in terms of strategies, firstly is think long-term, because sometimes when you're in those really tough environments, you can actually learn some really good skills. And I know for me, I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't worked for some of those tough bosses. Some of the toughest bosses gave me the hardest assignments, which were critical and pivotal to my career success. So get really clear. What are you learning from this role? Because if you're learning good things, you can then go, okay, there's a time period in which I can stick around and I can do this. But make sure you've got an expiration date, because know how long you can stay in that environment before it erodes you, and also before you start to absorb their type of behavior, because you don't want to turn into them. And that's very easy to do. If you are around toxicity, we know that emotions are contagious. It's very easy to absorb their type of behavior. And there's really interesting research that shows if you've got an abusive leader, that trickles down. You are more likely to abuse your own team in terms of how you lead them, or should I say not lead them. Build a support base around you. So look at who you've got around you in terms of people that you can share and confide in, but can also give you advice and support, because you want to have people that you can trust. So be careful about bitching and moaning at work, because you don't want things to go through back channels back to your boss. But it is good to have support around you, because what you can find is if you've got a strong network in your organization, that can act as a counterbalance to the power that your boss wields against you. And you may find one day that someone, a good boss taps you on the shoulder and says, I see all the good work you're doing and I know what that person's like. Come and work for me. And then also, and this is really critical, understand what your boss needs. What's their agenda? What is it that they define as success, and how can you help them? Because the more you can help them get whatever they want and they see they need you, the less they're actually going to, in a sense, maltreat you, but also they'll give you more of what you need. So sometimes it is sitting back and going, what is it they need? And also really checking yourself and your own behavior, because I've seen situations where people, rant and rave about how bad their boss is. And then when you sit down and talk about it and work through what the issue is, the issue actually is they're a bad employee. They're not doing their job, and they're not doing their job well. And so what the leader is doing, and obviously to some extent ineffectively, is trying to coach and performance manage, but doing it in a way that the person feels that they're being mistreated in some way, or just being driven too hard. So I think, that's one of the critical things. Make sure you're turning up and doing what it is that you need to do. So it's not about you. It really is about the other person.
Love all of that. Absolutely loved it. And this big memory scenario is going through my head as you're explaining this, and things are like, oh yeah, there we go. Yes, this makes sense because of this. And I'll indulge me for a second. I'll tell a quick story. And I was in a unit, one unit I was in, we had a horrible boss, atrocious. And all those things that you talked about, including mental health issues, all arose because of this one boss. And it drove productivity down. It drove up the mental health, mental health cases within the organization. And it was interesting that kind of that peer support group that you were discussing, because my boss, him and his peers, they would get together for coffee in the or for lunchtime / beginning afternoon. And it was like, I wasn't their rank level, so I wasn't really invited, but I could tell exactly what was going on. It was just, you know what, how can we support each other to get through this next round? How can we move on and get through whatever it is that needs to get done, so that, you know, we all don't get chewed out or destroyed here by it. So many great points. Love it all.
Yeah. And I also think through all of this as well is, you know, they're human too. So the key thing is to ask yourself, is their behavior consistent? So they're consistently bad. This is a behavioral pattern, a behavioral style that is either personality driven, or perhaps it's learned behavior. Or is this inconsistent? Because if it's inconsistent, you can look for causal factors. Is there something that's changed in the environment? Is it that they're given, you know, extra work from their boss? Is their boss driving them too hard? Are there huge pressures at work? Because if you can understand the pressure they're under, then part of the solution may be going and talking to your boss and going, I can see there's a lot on at the moment. How can I help you? What do you need from me? Because they may be struggling and not know how to ask or what else they need to sort of, you know, talk to their team about to really be able to cope with what's going on for them. And if you can reach out to them, you may find that they go, oh, thanks, I'm so glad that someone noticed. Yeah, look, there's a whole heap going on and I'd love your help with X.
Sometimes you have goals, but you know what? You have a hard time reaching them, and you just can't figure out why. Why is it that you can't achieve those things that you want to achieve? Maybe it's dedication. Maybe it's motivation. Maybe you haven't picked the right goals. So this is where I was not too long ago. And then I realized something. I've been developing the Power Goals program my entire life. And here it is now for you, where you can learn how to pick the right goals, figure out how to achieve those goals, how to stay on track, but most importantly, how to get back on track when you get off. So are you ready? Are ready to up your game and achieve those things that you've been meaning to achieve for so long now? Simply go to movingforwardleadership.com/power and learn more about the Power Goals program and achieve everything that you've been wanting to achieve. And now, back to the show. Right. Now, that's interesting. And I definitely agree with you that it could be behavioral. It could be the point that, like you said, they're under a lot of stress and they're not sure how to cope with it properly. So they're kind of lashing out per se. So are there some identifiers that I go, okay, it's more likely behavior, or it's more likely they're under a lot of pressure from their boss, or this is how they've been brought up through the organization, so that I can then adjust my style of how I'm going to deal with the situation?
Yeah. I always caution people against applying psychology 101 and trying to diagnose a person's pathology, because you can sit there and you can go, well, I've done the, narcissist inventory and I have given them a rating of X out of X and they are this. I think there's a danger when you do that. What I think is better is to get curious and to look at behavior, look at how they interact with people. Are they the same with everybody across the team, or is it more directed towards you or more directed to other people in the team? How do they manage hierarchy? So how do they manage up and how do they manage down? What's the workload that they're dealing with? How have things shifted over time? So you're getting really curious and asking lots of questions about the work environment, the person they work for, and the people that they're working with, and then seeing what's going on. And what I've found is, if you notice that there's a lot of pressure and you can start to feel the pressure, then it's likely that they're feeling pressure too. So also track and monitor your own behavior and your own feelings, and you can get a sense of what it's like. But what you'll see is patterns of behavior. And when you start to see patterns of behavior, that's when you can go, here's the thread of commonality, because they typically do this when this happens, or this is actually consistent. They're consistently like this in terms of, they need to be the big person. So they'll bully people, they'll put people down. And you can very quickly then work through what are the types of things that you can do to work with them, but also to look after yourself. And I think one of the key things through all of this is you remaining authentically you still living into your own values and being, having integrity so that you are making sure that you're not turning in to them, but also trusting your instinct. Because I think how often, if I go back through my own corporate career, I remember one particular situation and my gut instinct, my natural reaction would have been to have stepped into a conversation, to have had a very direct conversation with my boss about how we work together. I had someone who was my actual direct line manager, even though we both reported to the same person, but this was the person who managed me day to day. She had a very different personality to me. And she was like, no, you can't do that. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. This is how you need to play it. And so because she was the one that I worked with most closely, I felt like I had to follow her instructions. I look back and go, that was a mistake because I didn't step into the conversations with him. He saw me as a doormat. He saw me as someone who had no power. He saw me as someone who was not willing to stand up for themselves, yet standing up for myself is my natural behavior style and speaking up is my natural behavior style. And so I should have trusted my gut instinct, but it was early in my career and all of that. There's a whole raft of reasons why at the time I did it. So I always say to people, get in touch with your gut instinct. See what it's telling you, sit with it, see where you start to feel uncomfortable, because that will tell you something as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I really like it. And I especially like that part of, don't be a doormat, don't be a placemat. And I talk about that often, and especially when I'm developing junior, new leaders, when I'm coaching people, I'm like, what value are you adding in this process? You don't want to be the guy from the movie Office Space where he's like, well, I take the files from the engineers and I give it to the customer, and I take the file from the customer and I give it to the engineers, right? You want to be adding value, especially as a leader, because there are other lives at stake here. There are other people that matters, that counts, and you and how you deal with whatever it is and where you bring value matters.
Absolutely. And also, I always say to people, at the end of the day, employment is a value exchange. And this sounds really transactional, but this is how the working world now works. You turn up to do work and you deliver value. In return, you get value. Someone pays you. They promote you. They give you, fringe benefits, this, that, whatever it is, it's part of your employment package. That is it. The world of this whole sense of loyalty, and I know some people will dispute this, but it doesn't exist anymore. There's loyalty to people, but there's not loyalty to companies, because when a company is done with you, they will let you go. What is your marketability is the value that you bring. The more value that you bring, the uniqueness of that value, your ability to articulate and sell that value, that is huge. And also it gives you leverage. Once again, at a certain point in my corporate career, I had a person who tried to demote me, and I knew my leverage and I knew my value, and I played the game really smart, because in this particular situation, it was a game of brinksmanship, and I won because I knew what I needed to do at the right time in terms of my negotiation with this person. And he had completely underestimated my ability to go, yeah, pull the trigger. I'm happy to walk out. And how much are you going to pay me to leave? He did not see that coming. And so for them, he was then sort of sitting there going, oh, but I actually can't let you leave, because if you leave, there's all these other ramifications. And I'm like, no, I'm highly employable in the market and I'm ready to go right now. And so when you know your value and you've got confidence in that value, that also gives you power in the relationship. And so, I often say to people, you need to understand power. And this is not power over. This is that internal sense of power, the power that you have from within, because you know that you're good. You know that you deliver value, that you've got integrity, you've got authenticity. And when you've got that internal sense of power, that gives you the courage to step into those conversations where you go, I don't know what the outcome's going to be, and it could be uncomfortable, but I know that I need to do this, because if I don't do this, I'm stepping away from my power.
And you know what's great about everything you just said? You could even turn that as a leader and turn that towards your people. And I've had these conversations where people are stressed out, like, oh, I can't deal with, what's going on here. I'm like, you know what? You have options. Like, I get it. Don't worry, I'm living it. I'm the buffer between you and and our bad boss here. And believe me, I know, and I'm doing the best I can to to shelter you. Unfortunately, some things get through, but like you said, you have options. If you can't handle it, then yes, I will support you as a leader. Support them in looking for a new venture. Support them in enabling them to find something or try something different that will shelter them from what's going on with this bad boss, so that they can get back to being mentally healthy, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah. And also, I think that as a boss, you sometimes have to make tough decisions.
100%.
And that means that you're going to be doing things that they're not going to like you. And I've seen situations where I've had to move people on. And at the time, it's uncomfortable. It's not fun, but you're trying to do it in a way where you're treating a person with dignity and with respect. They're not liking you as they are going through this process. But invariably, they look back and go, actually, that was good. I was stuck. I was in the wrong role and I needed to move. I just didn't know how to move. And I'm glad that Michelle, in a sense, pushed me to move.
No, sometimes people need to get fired, and sometimes that's the best thing for them, right? Or they get laid off, or they get help to move on. And there's multiple ways to do it, but still, as a leader, I feel that we can support them people, and that is definitely our job. Now, one interesting part of your book is, what to do if you're the bad boss, if you're the one that is causing all this chaos and mayhem. Now, hopefully, I don't think the listener is that, but you never know. They might be like, just like you don't know what you don't know. Maybe I am a bad boss. Maybe, so how can people identify whether or not they're a bad boss, themselves, and how can they remedy this problem?
Look, you're very right when you say sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and you'll never know unless you ask. So look, you can look at metrics like, turnover and engagement results and productivity levels, because they will all be indicators of how effective you are as a leader. But the most effective tool that I've had done on me, and also now do it with all of my leadership and coaching clients, is a 360-degree feedback. It's objectively done. You assess yourself. You then get your team, colleagues, your boss, your boss's boss, suppliers or clients that you deal with. So you get a really lovely range of people completing the survey. And then you can see the gap between how you think you lead and how people actually experience you. And because you can stratify the data, so you can see it against those various categories, that can be really insightful, because you can look at it and go, wow, so my team is seeing this, but my boss sees something totally different, and my clients see something else, or my suppliers or my colleagues. And then you can sit back and go, okay, so why is that? Why are you showing up in different ways with different people? What's going on for you? What's the story that you're telling yourself about the leader that you need to be? Where's the consistency? Where's the inconsistency? And so once you've had those conversations, that helps generate awareness, then into understanding and insight, so that they can then develop a plan and work out, okay, where do I need to focus? Which are the elements that I need to shift? What are the things, maybe one or two things that I could do that could make the biggest impact right now to how I lead and the impact that I have on people. And so, there's two bits, the awareness, but then you also have to want to change. And so the leader has to go, I recognize and accept and see and accept what I'm hearing, but I also genuinely want to do something about it.
Yeah, that last part is crucial. And I think reality is that is the defining line. Wanting to change and knowing that, acknowledging that, you don't make the best decisions, you don't act necessarily in the best interests of everyone that you're leading, etc. But realizing, I want to change. Those are the people who I can work with as a coach. Those are the ones who I know that I can get to, and we'll get there, and that we will, get them out of that rut of being a bad boss and turn them actually into a leader. And sometimes it's not even that difficult once they go, right, I need to change. How do I do it? And sometimes it's like, listen, it's only a few minor tweaks. Instead of doing this, you could have did that, and boom. Like, and sometimes it's just little things.
Yeah. And I also think sometimes, I know for me, I had all these weird preconceived ideas and assumptions about what it meant to be a leader. And, when I dug into them, some of them were hangovers from how I was raised or things that my dad had said to me, or leaders that I had worked with early in my career. And so one of the, really critical things for leaders is checking your assumptions, checking your expectations. What's the type of leader you want to be? And where is that coming from? Is that the type of leader that you need now? And I always say to people, leadership is personal. So there's, the style of how I lead is going to be different to Scott, how you lead, and to how your, colleague beside you leads. And that's fine, because we've all got our own different sort of style. But also leadership is contextual. Different types of leadership is required in different contexts because the situation needs different things. And you would have seen that in the military. Consensus leadership is great, but if you're running into a battle, and you're on the enemy line, you're not going to be sitting down and debating with each other exactly who's going to go when and where and how and why. And, that doesn't quite work for me. Command and control in certain contexts actually works really well, and that's what you need.
No, absolutely, you are 100% right. And I actually coach something. And I have a solo episode, which I refer to as the leadership style spectrum. And on one side you have the laissez-faire, and on the other side you have the authoritarian. And often, one of the questions I get often as a leadership coach is like, "Hey, what's the best style?" I'm like, "Yeah, guess what? All of them and none of them." Because, like you said, it's completely contextual. You will shift along this spectrum depending on the scenario. And you could shift 3 times in a matter of minutes, depending on the situation you're in. You could be sitting in a meeting where you're firing someone, so completely authoritarian, and you finish that meeting, you walk down the hallway and you walk into a planning room and you got a team there like, "All right, folks, here's what we're looking at. Brainstorm, have at it." So then you got on completely laissez-faire, and then you may walk into another place where you become collaborative and you're working with others. So you've got to shift it. You got to be able to flow from one style to the next, and having an understanding of what style is the most important based off of the situation. So, Michelle, this has been fantastic. Absolutely great interview, which sadly we need to slowly wrap up here. But before we do, I got a couple of last questions for you. And
sure.
One is one that I ask every guest here at Moving Forward Leadership, and that is, according to you, Michelle Gibbings, what makes a great leader?
Oh, wow, that's such a big question. To me, a great leader is someone who inspires other people, helps them to get to places that they can't get to, but for the fact that they've worked with that person. So you're leaving them in a better place than where they were before they worked with you. That's greatness.
That's awesome. And this question is going to be much easier. How can people find you? How can they follow you? How can they be part of your journey? It's all about you. Shameless plug. Feel free to shoot it.
Awesome. Lovely. So website is michellegibbings.com. I'm on all the major platforms except TikTok. I don't TikTok. So yes, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And the latest book is Bad Boss. So what to do if you work for one, manage one, or are one. And it is important to put in the tagline, because as one of my Canadian friends said to me, "Michelle, if you just type in Bad Boss, you get a very different genre of book."
That's amazing. For the listener, I am going to do you a solid. It's going to be easy for you. Just go to the show notes at movingforleadership.com/152. The links are all there, including the direct link to the book, Bad Boss, which also is an affiliate link. So it does help me out with hosting the website and all this stuff. So if it is of interest to you, feel free to go to the show notes, grab the link, and buy yourself a copy. I highly recommend. Michelle, thank you for my copy. I truly appreciate it. It was a great read. And this has been a fun and great podcast.
Oh, look, thank you so much. I've had fun too. And first time I've been on a podcast with a Canadian. So this has been a first for me.
Oh, there we go. It's not my first with an Aussie. So, anyway, thanks and take care.
You too.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.